Hello everyone, this is Raza Dorani. In this video, we're going to focus on flow approvals. We will look at escalating approvals as well as delegating approvals. And not just that, we will also look at if a user is out of office, and according to that, we can redirect our approval actions to other approvers. So let's not waste any time and get straight into this video. So out here in my SharePoint site, I have leveraged the new Microsoft Lists feature, and I have leveraged the travel request template. And in this template, I have gone ahead and added a couple of new columns. One column is called the approval status column. If you look at the settings for this column, it has 4 choices: new, pending, approved, rejected. By default, the status is new. I also have an approval comments column. And this column is just a very simple multi-line of text column in SharePoint. Now let's go ahead and start building our approval flow. So out here in flow.microsoft.com, I will go ahead and build an automated flow because I want to trigger my flow when a new item is created in my SharePoint list. So I'm going to pick the trigger and I will click on create. Now once this is created, I will go ahead and pick my SharePoint site and pick my list name, which is travel requests. Next step, connect to the start and wait for an approval action. The approval type, in this case, I'm just going to use one approver. So I'm going to say first to respond. I will pick the title as dynamic content. For assign to, I will just go ahead and pick my own account right now. So for details, I will go and add certain details about the travel request, like the title of the travel that the user entered or the reason for travel. Item link will be the link to item, and description will probably be the title of the travel request that the user has put in. What we go ahead and do next is we just going to add my condition to check the outcome of the approval. So here's my outcome. If it is equal to approve, I would like to go ahead and start updating the item now. Of course, I can also go ahead and send notification emails along the way. So I will use the update item action, pick my SharePoint site and the same list, which is my travel request. The ID will be the ID from the trigger. And all I would like to update in this case are 2 things. One is the approval status that will change to approved because this is my approved branch. I'm going to say rename this to approved item. For the approval comments, I'll just put in an emoji that I copied from the web and the word approved for now. And this is approved by the user who made the approval. So I can go and pick the responses approver name. This will apply the for loop. And I would also like to go ahead and put the date and time at which this approval action was taken. So I'll put a couple of brackets and then go to the expression syntax and write an expression that looks like this. Convert from UTC. I will then pick the dynamic content, which is the completion date of the approval. Next, I will pick my time zone that I want to convert this to, and finally the format that I want this converted to. And once I'm done with this, I have my approval comments embedded right here. Of course, title is a mandatory field, so I will have to make sure that I have this filled out. Now, once I'm done with this, I can go ahead and copy this and paste this right here. And this time in my second apply to each loop, in this case, this is for the rejected item. And right here, instead of approved by, all I need to do is change this to rejected by whoever the user was who took the approval decision and the date and time at which the decision was taken. Of course, the approval status this time will change to rejected. Of course, when I'm starting the approval process, I would also, right before that, would like to update my same SharePoint item. And I would like to change the approval status to pending because this is the beginning of the approval process. Now, this is a very, very simple approval process that I've put in place right now whenever a new travel request comes in. But now the use case here is around escalations. Now this will work when the approver is available to respond to my approval process, of course, but there could be scenarios in which my approver is probably not available or the approver is just not responding to the approval action. And the challenge here is that every flow has a run duration of maximum 30 days. If within 30 days the flow run is not completed, in that case, the flow will time out. And if the flow times out, the approval action associated with it will also time out. So how do we go about ensuring that our process is complete? And one way in which we can do that is by escalating our approvals if we know that the approver has not responded for a specific duration of time. Now this is start and wait for an approval process. I just have one action in this flow. This flow from start to finish will run for 30 days. Of course, I have 30 days then for this single approval action right here in the context of my flow. But what if my approver is not responsive for that duration? So the way we can handle that is by going to the approval action and going to the three ellipses right here and heading over to settings. Now within settings, for every action and flow, we have something known as timeout. And as you can see, it says timeout, limit the maximum duration that this action can take. There is an example given as well, which is P1D. That means wait for the period of 1 day. And if you look at the duration attribute right here, there's a small information icon. If you select this, it will tell you that in this space, you need to specify the duration in ISO 8601 format. Now, of course, we are not expecting anybody to learn this format by heart, but if you go over to Wikipedia, and I will share this link in the description of this video, there's a section right here for durations, where it will clearly show you what you need to utilize for your ISO 8601 format when you're putting in the duration in this specific action settings. So in my case, let's say I want to put a setting wherein if my approver does not respond, and this is the first use case right now, if the approver does not respond for, let's say, 10 days, then in that case, I will go and auto approve the travel request that comes in. If I would like to time this out after 10 days, go ahead and type P10D. That means time out this action after 10 days. And then I can go ahead in my flow and handle the timeout and accordingly take my decision. Now, of course, this is a demo video that I'm doing right now. So typically you would set this in days. Remember, the flow itself does not exceed 30 days. So no point in extending this to 40 days or 50 days because your flow is going to time out in that case. So right here, what I will go ahead and do just for the specific purpose of this demo, I will set this to PT1M, which is basically means time this out after 1 minute. Okay, PT1M is 1 minute, and that's based on the ISO 8601 format. So I will go ahead and click done. That means if this approver does not respond now for 1 minute, in that case, this action will surely time out. After this action, I have this condition. If I look at this action and if I go to the configure run after settings for this action will run only after the previous action is successful. But what do I do if the previous action has timed out, right? In that case, we can do something like this. We can go to insert a step and add a parallel branch. And in this case, let's say if the previous action times out, maybe I want to auto approve. So what do I do in that case? Very simple. I will go ahead and once again for SharePoint, update the item. Go and pick my SharePoint site, go and pick my SharePoint list, put in the ID of my item right here, put in the mandatory title column. And then the approval status, I'm going to call this approved, auto approved by system. That means the system is auto approving this purely because no decision was taken. But this is how you can go and auto approve this. Now there are still certain settings I need to ensure are in place in order for this action to truly get called. First thing is always rename your actions. And in order for this branch to get called, once again, if I go to three ellipses, configure run after. So when is this action going to get called? If the previous action is successful. In my case, I want to execute this only if the previous action has timed out. So I will remove this and just pick has timed out and say done. Now this part of my branch will only run if this action has actually timed out. However, if my approver does take the decision in the stipulated amount of time, in that case, the left-hand side branch will execute and the typical flow of my approval process will continue. Another step that I will add after the escalation auto approved action, I will add the terminate action to complete the flow. I will call this a successful flow run because I have auto escalated. The reason is because the approver has not responded. So I will go ahead and save this flow. Now I'm logging in as a different user persona. In this case, the user is James. So James has logged in and James has access to the travel request list. So James is going to go ahead and create a new travel request. When the travel request comes in from James, you will notice that the approval status begins with new because that's the default value that I have set for this column. So now as you can see, the approval status has changed to pending. That's because my flow has started. So as you can see, my flow is currently running and I will wait to take the approval decision. I will wait exactly 1 minute because I want this action to time out so I can show you how the auto escalation process works. And there you go. As you can see, my flow has completed successfully. So this action actually did time out exactly after 1 minute, and you can see the timing right here as well. That's because I defined the timeout for this action as PT1M, which is exactly 1 minute. And then it went ahead and went into this side of the branch because I set up the configure run after to run only if this action times out, which it did. It went and auto approved the item, and not just that, it went ahead and successfully closed my flow as well. Now, if I head back to my travel request list, you will note that the approval status has changed to approve, and the approval commands is right here that says auto approved by the system. And that's because it got escalated because my approver did not respond in the stipulated amount of time, and that is something that is configurable. In one of the previous videos related to the approval cookbook series, I demonstrated how we can create those approval reminders. So we can use that in combination with this, so we can keep reminding our approver to take their approval decision. And if they don't, we can then go ahead and auto escalate it. In this case, I just went ahead and approved the travel request. Now let's try and cover scenario number 2. So let's say if the first approver does not respond in a stipulated amount of time, maybe I would like to auto escalate that to the approver's manager. So I'm defining James as the approver. And of course, same concept. If James does not respond, in my case in 1 minute, because that's the timeout that I have defined for this action, it will go and auto escalate. Now in this scenario, I want another approval process to begin if James does not respond in a stipulated amount of time. In that case, once again on this side of the branch, I can go ahead and take additional actions. Now first thing what I would like to do is go and grab James's manager. So on the right hand side right here, I will go ahead and add an action. And the action that I'm going to pick right here is from the connector which is called Office 365 users. Now as part of this connector, there is one action called Get Manager. And as part of this, all I have to do is give the email ID of the person from whom I want the manager details. In my case, very simple, very straightforward. My user is James. So here's the email address for James, and I will get the details around the manager for James. Now in my Active Directory, the way I've set this up, I have Raza as the manager for James. So it's actually going to go ahead and grab my information. Now in this case, it will go and grab the approver's manager. I would like to start another approval process and I can do the same steps right here. Well, guess what? I can just go and literally copy this and paste this action right here, right? Copy paste, don't reinvent the wheel. And here where it says assign to James, I'm going to remove this. And in this scenario, I will go and grab the dynamic content, and from the get manager action, I will get the mail attribute of the manager. And in this case, I will call this escalation request for the vacation request that has come in. So if James as the approver does not respond, go and get the manager for James and then start another approval process. And once again, I can take the same steps right here. I can add an action, add a condition, check the outcome. If it is equal to approved, I will go ahead and approve it. So in this case, it would be approved by the approver's name. And of course, this will apply the for loop. I'm just going to keep it simple for now. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this and then paste the same action right here. And then instead of approved, I will go ahead and say rejected by the approver in this case. And of course, I have my terminate action to successfully terminate the flow. Now, one thing to note, because I added that extra action, I will lose that configure run after. So I'll have to go and add that again. Now, get manager is the first step. So I'll go right here, go to configure run after, and configure this to run only if the first approval action has timed out. So when the first approval action kicks in, I have the timeout defined right here. And if the approver responds, great, it will move ahead and take the final decision. If the approver does not respond in the stipulated amount of time, I can then go ahead and start the second approval, and I'm basically escalating it to the manager here in this case, wherein the manager now needs to go ahead and take a decision. Now let's go ahead and save this flow. So now back as James goes ahead and creates a second request. And here's the second request that James has just created. Now in this scenario, let's see how the process works. Now once the approval process begins, of course, James was the approver who I had identified as my first approver. James is getting the approval action right here. If I head back to the flow run, here is the first action that has triggered. Now if James would have responded, the flow is the standard flow as always. We just go and check the outcome and take the necessary decision. Because my timeout was defined for 1 minute, it's gone ahead now to the right hand side of the branch, gone ahead and grabbed the approvers manager. In this case, in Active Directory, the manager for James Taylor is my account, which is Reza, and then it started another approval process, this time for Reza. And here's Reza's approval process right here, and I can go ahead and take my decision. I will say okay, and I will click on submit, and once my decision is recorded, the process will then move ahead right here, and the final approval process for the travel request is now complete. If I look back at the travel request list, the status says approved and it has been approved by Reza Dorani. And I could have easily put in some comments in here that said this is an escalated version of the approval because the first user did not take the approval action. This has been taken by the user's manager. Now, of course, what happens if the user's manager does not respond in the stipulated amount of time? In that case, you can then go ahead and add another process around that which says, okay, this time just auto approve it or auto reject it, whatever your process is. So now in the third scenario, let's focus on another use case. So let's say I created my first approval action and I'm assigning this to an approver. Let's say in this case, it's Reza. And if Reza is out of office, I would like to delegate this approval action to another user. So how would I do something like that? So firstly, how do I grab information about Reza is out of office? Now, typically in Outlook, if somebody has set the out of office for their account, you will get the mail tip associated with the Exchange mailbox. In this case, if I head back to Flow and if I go to add an action, there is an action related to mail tips. It's called get mail tips for a mailbox. If I select this, all I have to do is define the email address of that mailbox. So in my case, the user is Reza. So I've just gone ahead and put the email address in here. Of course, all of this can be made dynamic. I'm just going ahead and plugging in the approver's email right here. So I can go and get the mail tips for a specific mailbox. And not just that, once I get this information, I can then check to see for how long from today is this user out of office. In this case, what I'll do is I'll just clean up all the remaining actions. So I've just cleaned up all the other actions. We will add the approval step shortly. The goal here is just to see what we get as a response to this action. So let's go ahead and test this and let's run this. Now, once I test this, of course, the main action that we are focusing on right here is the mail tips. This is the response that I get as part of the value property. So let's copy this and put this in Visual Studio Code. So here's the response that I get in the value property. Now, first thing to notice that value is an array, as you can see. And here is my first object in that array, which is my mailbox. And here is the email address of the user. And right here we have automatic replies. Now, because I have actually gone ahead and set my automatic replies, I will get a response that looks like this. So it says, yes, I will be out of office until October 16th, 2020. And not just that, I even have the scheduled start time from when I will be out of office until the scheduled end time. This is in the case in which a user has mail tips set up. Now, if I rerun this with a user's account who does not have mail tips set up, in this case, if I go right here, you will notice a few things. In this case, automatic replies does not have the attributes for scheduled start time and scheduled end time. That's purely because the user does not have anything set up. So in that case, there's no automatic replies or any message that the user has put in place. So what I can do in this case is literally just check to see if the message property is empty or not. If the message property is empty, that means the user is currently in office. If not, then the user is out of office. I can even figure out in my flow, when as my flow currently started, I'm starting my approval action. Is the user going to be able to respond in a stipulated amount of time? So if I know that my approver is out for, let's say, 1 month, my flow itself is going to time out in 1 month. Why not go ahead and leverage this and figure out if the approver is going to be available to even respond? In this case, I'm going to keep it very simple. If there is a message value existing, that means my approver is basically going to be out of office for a few days and that person may not be the right person to approve or reject. So in this case, I will go ahead and automatically escalate it to another user. So let's go ahead and check this out. So this time, my mail tip checks for R. Doran, which is Reza's account for whom I have out of office set up. Now the next step, what I would like to execute is I will add a very simple condition first before I even start my approval action. Now we've seen the JSON right here. Now if I pick value, this is the value property, right? It's an array. And if I just pick value, it's just going to give me the value property, of course, right here. And for a condition action, I can't even do peek code and copy the expression. So typically what I use is my best friend, which is the compose action, and compose just creates an arbitrary object in the flow. So I will go ahead and grab that same value property right here. And this time if I head over to peek code, I get the code behind it. So I'll just go ahead and copy this code, click done. I will cancel this, go to the expression box, paste that same code. Now this gets me to the value property, which is right here. Now value is an array. I want the first value, so I'll put a question mark and 0. So it gives me the first value. Once again, I will put a question mark. So right now I'm in the context of the first item. Now what do I need from this? I need the message, which is under another node called automatic replies. So I will put automatic replies in square brackets and single quotes. Once again, question mark keeps doing the null check for me. This is all expressions. I have an exclusive series that I did with John Levesque on expressions. The link to that series is in the description of this video, so do check that out. So I need the message right here. I will go ahead and plug the message right here in. So this now will actually give me that message. So in my condition, this time I will go and plug that same expression that I have right here, or I can of course pick the compose value. I'll just plug the expression. So is this equal to blank? If it's blank, that means this user is not out of office. Otherwise, this user is out of office. So I need to define my approver. So I will go ahead and initialize a variable called var_approver. Let's rename this action to who my approver is. This will be of type string. Of course, my approver in this case is Reza, so I'll just plug in Reza. And right here, my condition is this equal to blank? If it is equal to blank, that means the approver has not said out of office, so it's fine. If not, that means the approver is out of office. So in this case, I will go ahead and set that variable. Once again, my approver variable, I will change it to another approver, who of course I can check to see if that approver is out of office as well, and plug in James if Reza is out of office. So that's what I've done in this case, right? I've just defined my approver. Once I have my approver defined, same steps as before. I will go ahead, start and wait for an approval action. In the assign to, I will pick my variable, which is the approver. So here's my approval action. So there you go. If the outcome is approved, I'm approving the item. Otherwise, I'm rejecting the item. The only logic here that I've incorporated is basically I'm checking to see if my original approver, is that approver out of office, yes or no. So I'll go ahead and save this. And now let's go back to the travel request list as James. And let's go ahead and create another item. Once I put in my new request and the flow is now running, let's look at the flow in action. Let's go ahead and grab the mail tips for my approver. And in this case, of course, it's going to get the message. Here's my compose action. As you can see, it just grabs that message, this by using the expression syntax. And then I set the initial approver and I check to see if the message is empty or not. In my case, the message is not empty. That means the approver is out of office. So I've gone ahead and changed the approver now to a different approver. And then that approver, in this case, it's James, will get the approval notification. And here is the notification that James has received. So let's say James goes ahead and approves this request. And if we head back to the travel request list, as you can see right here, this travel request is now approved and it has been approved by James. So right here, we've leveraged the mail tips based on the approver's mailbox to ensure that the approver is available to take the approval decision. If not, we've gone ahead and basically escalated or delegated it to another user. So now the next scenario that we will cover is around delegation. Playing a use case or a scenario in which an approver would like to potentially go ahead and delegate their task for a specific duration maybe to another user. And that user can take the decisions on the approver's behalf. So in order to create a system or a process like that, we would need a data source where we would store the delegation information. Now, of course, in my scenario, I'm leveraging SharePoint. So I can just quickly go to SharePoint and actually just create a very simple list, call it approval delegation, and just create this list in SharePoint. And right here in the SharePoint list, I can add a person type column. This is who are you delegating it to. So I can call this delegating to, from which date to which date. So I'll pick date and time. I will call this from. And the second one, I will again pick the date and time column. SharePoint, I will call this to. So from this date to this date, I'm delegating my work to this user. And this is my view, so I can quickly go and show who the person is who has created this item. Any user who wants to delegate their tasks to other users can actually leverage this list and define who they are delegating their work to. So for example, in this case, I'm logged in as James. So James can come in here. So James says, maybe I will be working on a project and I would like to delegate this to Reza from basically today all the way through the 21st of October, and save. So you can quickly choose any data source of your choice and make that data source available so that users can define who their delegates are. And not just that, why not leverage Power Apps in that scenario as well? If you go to Power Apps and if you head over to templates, there is actually a very neat template called Out of Office. And I will click create. And just like that, I have an app just by leveraging the template that will set the out of office for my users. And this is what the app looks like. I can just quickly go and say, you know what, I will be out of office for the next 2 days. This is a vacation that I'm taking. Yeah, I will have no internet access. I can go ahead and define who to contact during this period. James during this period. Click next. And this is what my out of office message is going to look like. So you can leverage this app for generating those out of office messages, and users have an app on their mobile device that they can directly use. And not just that, in the same Power App, I can also add another button right here called Delegation, and maybe I can define who my delegate is as well during this period and store that maybe in that data source. Of course, in my scenario, I'm keeping it simple. I just have this very simple list that I have defined right here. Now let's go back to my flow. So I've defined my approver. Of course, right here in the assign to field for my action, I can define who my approver is. In my case, before defining this, I want to check to see if the approver has set a delegate in the approval delegation list. So how do I check that? I will go ahead and use the get items action from my SharePoint list because that's my data source. Pick my site. I will pick my list. And in this case, I will go ahead and add a filter query so I can filter and see if the approver has anyone defined for delegation. So the query is going to be the created by column, which the internal name in SharePoint is author / email. And please note E and M is uppercase here, email equal to, and right here in single quotes, I need to define the email address for the person that I'm trying to query that list for. And that I'm defining in my variable approver. So that's my query to check to see if in this list I have any item that has been created by the approver. In my case, I do have an item right here. And another thing I would like to check is that whether the current date and time is between this time range. The from date is less than or equal to, in single quotes, the expression UTC now, and the to column that I have should be greater than or equal to, once again, UTC now. So the current date and time, the from date should be less than it, and the to date should be greater than it in order for this condition to be met. And if this condition is met, this data set will return me items. And now what I need to do is check to see, once again, a condition. How do I check to see how many items this has returned? Can use expressions again, can use the length operation function. And for the dynamic content, I can check to see the length of the get items value. How many items have been returned? If this is equal to 1, if there is a matching criteria defined, result set will be 1. In that case, I want to go ahead and grab the delegate. So how do I grab that? I will go ahead and set that same variable again, the variable for the approver, and the value for the approver. Once again, if you look at the expression that I used right here, I will copy what's there in the length function. These are all expressions. I'll go back to the expression editor, put a question mark, put 0 because I just want. Remember, get items returns an array. I know it will only return one value. That's why the length is equal to 1 has been checked. If that's the case, I will go ahead and grab that first item. And from that first item, what do I need? From that first item, I need this column information, which is delegating to. So I'll paste the internal name of the column right here. And then from delegating to, I'm interested in the email value that is returned of the user to whom the user is delegating the function to. And that's going to be my approver. And then after that, the steps are the same. I'm creating my approval task, defining who my approver is, and then checking the outcome. So as you can see, my flow has run. So here's the get items action. And if I go to condition right now, notice the condition has evaluated to true. That's because right now, as I'm executing this, it's the 12th of October. And if you look at the delegation that has been defined, I'm saying that from the 12th all the way to the 21st, James, who is the creator of this item, has delegated his work to Reza. So that means this will delegate to Reza, and it's gone ahead and grabbed my information from this delegation list, and accordingly it has gone ahead and started the process for me. So here is the approval action that has been created for me, Reza. Let's go ahead and edit this, and instead of picking Reza, let's pick another user this time. Let's pick Sarah and save. So let's say James is now delegating it to Sarah. If we go and retest this flow, you will note that once again the condition is true, and this time it's gone ahead and dynamically fetched Sarah. Let's make another change now. Let's edit this item, and let's say the from date is not from today. In fact, I'm going to change this to tomorrow. Now if we run the flow and test it again, this time you will note that the condition has evaluated to false. It has not got any results back. And the reason is because if you look at my filter query, it is querying to see if the creator is James, but at the same time, it's checking to see if the from date and the end date matches the criteria that I have defined. And because it does not match that criteria, it's not yet reached the point to which the delegate needs to be called. It is not going to delegate, and the approval task in this case is going to continue to be with the original user, and in my case that user is James. So James will receive that approval task. And here is me logging in as James, and here is James who's just received that approval task. Very important to note that a flow run duration is 30 days only, and hence it's important to keep reminding your approvers. Also, if your approvers are out of office, go ahead and escalate it or delegate it to some other user. You can also use that out of office template that I showcased in Power Apps and go and add the delegation logic to it and make it available to your organization within no time at all. So I hope you enjoyed this video around escalations and delegations for approval actions. If you did like it, then comment, like, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I will see you all in the next video.